Okay, so we're recording. Hello, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for joining us to another exciting session on education technology. And this is going to be the fourth one that we're focusing specifically on education technology. We've had with Andy Lydell and with Dr. Jared Horvath and with Emily Cherkin, and we're really pleased and thankful to Michael McLeod, who is joining us today. And Leath is going to introduce him, but before I introduce Leath, I just wanted to say a few words. So both Leath and I are parents in a school district that is outside of Philadelphia called LMSD. And there's a lot of news and attention about LMSD and what's happening here. And I think it's just important to mention a few words. This is truly, as we see in so many districts around us, this is as grassroots as it gets. Parents basically reaching out to each other from different grades, different schools in the district, and saying, why do our kids need to be on screens so much? Why does our district need to invest in more and more and just sign a contract of $1 million with iReady? So there's a lot of grassroots motion here in our district, especially in the last 6 months. Started with phones, bell to bell, too much technology, no filters. And now the big focus is on many families on what they are interested in is opting out from the personal one-to-one devices. But it's important to mention that this is not our goal, opt out from one-to-one. Our overarching goal is to reduce significantly the amount of screens. And the way that we see it, it's really not so much opting out, but it's opting in to human-based teaching, the connection between the teacher and the child and the children, the social skills, and so much more that is important, that the screens are basically behaving almost as screens from that attention, or blocks or walls from that attention to happen. And two things that I wanted to say about our movement, because there are some rumors that are being spread. That we are some sort of an anti-technology cult. It is not about that. We don't think that there is room, as Michael was going to speak about, for education technology, but absolutely to have some sort of what Emily Cherkin calls technology education, which means basically computer labs, computer carts, that you can learn about the digital world, about technology, etc. That is okay, and we support that. And then the second thing that I have no idea where that rumor has started, but we see it all around us, is that this is some sort of disappointment in teachers, or, our displeasure from teacher. And it's the opposite. We, especially, I can speak only on behalf of my kids. We love our teachers in the last 2 years so much. And we just want more time, more visual interface and talking to each other. This is all about empowering and giving more power and time to the teachers and less to the screens. So this is just a brief introduction, and I'm pleased to introduce Leath. And Leath she has two kids also in Lower Merion School District. Leath Spear Barton. She's an early childhood specialist. She is a social work master candidate, LMSD parent, founder of caring.com. And she brings a strengths-based family systems perspective to her work with families, experience supporting neurodivergent children and parents, including those with ADHD. She just finished a year-long social work internship at a residential psychiatric treatment facility for children exactly between 6 and 14, and the vast majority of the children had ADHD diagnosis. So I think it's a perfect fit. And Leath, why don't you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what is caring, and then introduce Michael.
Yes, thank you so much. As I mentioned, the highlight of my educational experience so far at Bryn Mawr College has been working in this residential psychiatric treatment facility. I was with the 10 to 12-year-olds who live there full time, and they attend an on-ground school also to support their emotional behavioral needs, but the majority of the children there did have an ADHD diagnosis. So caring is one-on-one and group support for families with children. I've mostly been working with families with children 0 to 3, and so this is expanding the age group that I worked with last year. But I'm very happy to be here, and I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, a first grader and a fifth grader, and the jump between EdTech in elementary school, which ends in 4th grade in this district, to middle school and 5th grade has been quite significant. And so I'm really thankful to be part of this conversation. And I'll go ahead and introduce Michael. Michael McLeod is an award-winning keynote speaker, award-winning professional development trainer, co-host of the ADHD Parenting Podcast, author of the Executive Function Playbook and the Executive Function Playbook in Action, founder of GrowNowADHD.com. He promotes science and data on how EdTech and one-on-one devices inhibit the development of executive function skills. All of this sounds so brilliant, and I'd love to hear about all of this. How did you get started with this work?
Yeah, so I started my career as a speech and language pathologist. And during my time as an SLP, I was being supervised by an apraxia specialist. And she worked with this national nonprofit that worked with boys and girls with chromosomal disorders. And a lot of those boys had apraxia of speech. And then along with that apraxia was also ADHD. So I was able to be trained by really great doctors and neuropsychs on ADHD and executive functions. And I learned rather quickly there's really very little out there for these kids. There's very little out there in terms of treatment. They're being sent to all these ineffective and non-evidence-based treatments like talk therapy and counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy that really truly are not evidence-based for ADHD and executive functions. So I really wanted to take a deep dive into Dr. Russell Barkley, Dr. George McCloskey, Sarah Ward, Kristen Jacobson, and really learn about what's happening out there and what really truly helps build these crucial set of skills known as executive functions. And I also learned that ADHD is so misunderstood. People still think that it's an attention disorder. People still think that executive functioning is just time management, organization, messy backpacks, and messy folders. Executive functions are the most crucial set of skills for human beings to develop. Every single parent wants their kids to live a greater life than they lived before them. And the only way you can do that is by building executive functioning skills, not your GPA, not your IQ, not your diploma or your grades. It's your executive functioning skills that allow you to move out of your parents' house, get a job, keep a job, make friends, keep friends. So I developed the internal skills model to move away from the focus of all external hyperactivity, external inattentiveness, external time management, organization, and focus on the internal skills of self-regulation and self-motivation towards non-preferred tasks. And we did a year-long research study on it, and everything's really expanded from there.
So I wanted to ask you, Michael, how did you get so involved? I mean, this is something that the executive functions and ADHD, and many people know you, and many people in the community actually you're taking care, or your organization is taking care of their kids. How did you connect all of this to basically, because you're now becoming a big activist and advocate about the conversations about education, technology, and screens in schools. So how did you make the connection? And maybe tell us a little bit about this journey, and if it's related or relevant only to children with ADHD, for example, or do you see this really relevant to all the children?
It's definitely relevant to all of the children in terms of this executive functioning crisis. I love the title that you guys chose for this tonight, the executive functioning crisis. But very simply put, there is no greater victim, no bigger victim of big tech's predatory marketing than our ADHD and our neurodivergent youth. They are the ones you cannot in 2026 discuss an ADHD boy or girl, child or teen without also discussing an incredibly debilitating screen addiction. It goes 100% hand in hand. The ADHD brain is time blind, stuck in the moment. The core deficit of ADHD is a deficit in nonverbal working memory, which is the imagination, the ability to make mental movies of the past and learn from past experiences and make mental movies of the future, and you can work towards that future. They're lacking that skill, so they're stuck in the moment. So their brain is hardwired towards instant gratification. So at baseline, their brain is seeking screens or conflict. They have a negative attention-seeking brain, so they get a lot of dopamine from conflict. But if screens are available to them, because their brains are so hardwired towards instant gratification, they are going to choose that screen 1 million times out of 1 million times. Every single day, parents reach out to me and they'll say, why won't my son just do his morning routine? Why won't my son just do his homework? Why won't my son join a club, sport, activity, or get to bed on time, or do his chores? And what I tell parents in our parent training is we have to reframe that question from why won't my child just do the task to what are they doing instead of the task? So it's not why won't my son do his homework? What is he doing instead? Chances are he's on his phone, or he's misusing his laptop in his room behind closed doors, or he's playing Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft. So the ADHD brain is very similar to the gambling addict brain. And when you give a child a computer in a classroom, that's like asking someone with a severe gambling addiction to go sit in a casino and read a book and not pull the slot machine. It's the exact same thing. And you think, and we talk so much about screens, but in reality, the big thing here is the internet. It's not screens, it's the internet. If we gave kids laptops with no Wi-Fi, no data, no ability to access the internet, this wouldn't be a problem. And smartphones are addictive because they are mini computers. The whole point that we call them phones is all part of big tech's predatory marketing. Those aren't phones. Those are supercomputers in your pocket on you at all times. It is internet addiction. It is the ability to escape reality, escape challenge, escape non-preferred tasks, escape new experiences, escape struggle, escape boredom instantly, and go right into the virtual world. And these kids now are spending 1, 2, 3, up to 8, 9, 10 hours a day on the internet in the virtual world. And we wonder why they don't have real world skills, because all they have is virtual world skills. And sometimes it gets so bad and the addiction gets so bad, parents start to tell themselves all these cognitive distortions to keep the screens in their lives. They'll say, oh, it's okay. He's going to grow up and be a coder, and he's going to be a computer scientist. Well, playing video games and surfing the web and doom scrolling is not practice to become a computer scientist or a coder. So we have to be very, very careful here. And our ADHD youth are absolute victims in this. And it drives me nuts when I see all the pseudoscience on social media that screens regulate the neurodivergent brain. That is absolute nonsense. And that is all part of big tech's predatory marketing, because it's the attention economy. All of these free to download things, Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, Snapchat, that are so addictive and made with persuasive design to be addictive. It's not making money by the ads. It's not making money from downloads. It's making money from how long you're on it. And that's exactly what it is. So our ADHD youth are the biggest victims in this entire mess.
Thank you so much for that. I'm wondering if you could talk more about the addictive nature. Like what is it? I think you mentioned dopamine, or dopamine certainly comes up a lot. What makes it so addictive? Can you
Yeah,
expand?
it's like it's a constant dopamine rush, and the touch screens. Anytime you're able to just get a stimulus from the swipe of a finger, the phone is always going to be that. It's addictive to neurotypicals. Let's be honest. Us adults, what's the first thing we grab when we wake up? We look at our phone. What's the last thing we look at before we go to sleep? What are we grabbing at every single red light? We're checking our phone to look at these notifications. They're made to be addictive. All of these developers hire teams of psychologists to make them as addictive as possible. They're addictive by design. Did I get a notification? Did I get a like? Was there an update? And just overall, just scrolling, just being able to scroll and do these things. That's why it drives me nuts when a parent might have a screen addicted child, and then they'll fall back on, oh, he has to learn the skills to manage his screens. Can I sign him up for therapy so you can teach him the skills to manage so he can manage it on his own? There's no chance of that happening. That's a parenting pipe dream. So adults can't even do that. And we have a fully developed brain. The brain develops until you're 30 years old from back to front, and the executive functioning in the prefrontal cortex, the self-regulation system, is the last to develop. So we have fully brain developed adults with their full cognition, 30, 40, 50 years old. And they are addicted to screens. They're playing on it in front of their kids. They're checking it in the morning. They're checking it at night. And we expect a 14, 15, 16-year-old to be able to do that. It's not going to happen. And those aren't skills that you can just teach. The concept that you can get your child in therapy and the therapist can teach them to do non-screen based tasks, it's simply not going to happen. It's made to be addictive.
So I have a lot of follow-up questions, but I'll try to focus. So first of all, I very much relate. I try personally, I don't, I'm not a lot on social media, but I am including promoting this webinar, for example, or the petitions that we're doing, or, the grassroots movement that we're doing here. And I'm exactly like you said. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, let's see what happened. And if somebody responded, or how many people, now signed the petition before I go to speak. So I feel this, like whenever I see my phone around, I feel like I need to grab it and see what it is. So I totally can only imagine how it is for children. But I want to be more puristic. Let's say that there's a family that doesn't give, wait until 8th, wait until 18, not giving the kids a phone. Let's say that miraculously we found a way that the kids are on the Chromebooks from school, but somehow there's no internet. It's just the iReady and all of the apps, for math, for social science, for teaching, for all of that. You talked about the harms of the internet, but what about the actual ways that people are using education technology for mathematics? I mean, because my daughter comes, she's second grade, and she tells me that she doesn't like all these cling cling and the coins that are getting and all of these. I mean, it bothers her, maybe because we talk about it so much at home. But what do you think, purely about the education technology? Forget about the internet for a second.
Yeah, of course. It's absolute nonsense. It's sort of playing down to their lack of attention. So overall, yes, we have ADHD kids that struggle with executive functions and self-regulation. But due to this entire generation of youth, basically this entire generation of youth grew up in a world where us adults who give the world to our dependents, our kids, we gave them a world where we took the things from them that they need to develop these skills. Outdoor, unsupervised play, boredom, and struggle. Those are the most important things for kids to experience. Outdoor play, boredom, and struggle. All three of those things are like going to the gym for your brain, and it builds self-regulation in so many different ways. Screens, number one. Number two is how hard it is to be a parent these days. Parents can't pick up their phone without getting yelled at by another parenting influencer that they're not being a perfect parent. There's never been a harder time to be a parent in history, with all the pressure put on parents thinking that they can just mold their child. Dr. Russell Barkley talks about how parents are shepherds, not engineers. Kids are born with so many personality traits. Parents really don't have that much control over who their child becomes. But if they are raised by screens, it's the screens raising them, and these skills are going to be delayed. So this whole concept of gamification of education, all the research is telling us is that all it really does, it makes them better at those games. It's not teaching, they're not gaining the skills. There's no information retention, or little to no information retention. They're playing down. They're basically saying this generation of youth has little to no attention span. So let's make gamification to play to that attention span. Like just recently, I heard an interview with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and they were talking about how when they make movies now, they purposefully in the script have to constantly repeat the plot because they know everyone in the audience is going to be on their phones half the time. So every time they make a script, they have to constantly repeat the plot to play to people's poor attention spans. And that's what we're doing to kids, where instead of dealing with the root cause and getting rid of the tech and getting rid of all this gamification of education, we're doing more gamifying. So nothing can ever replace, for kids and teens, relationships, experiences, project-based learning, having personal interactions with your teacher, interactions with peers, that Montessori education, that Waldorf education, that play-based education we see in Finland and Sweden, all over. That's the best thing for kids by a mile, and teaches executive functions with academics. So this gamification is just trying to change something without dealing with the root cause.
Scary. So
Very.
I do have a follow-up question, because you were talking before about internet. And I remember that you and I spoke once, and you told me something that kind of stuck with me. This was like many months ago, is that you work with a lot of families. Sometimes you go to hundreds of houses of, families, and you see children in their natural environment, and you see what they are doing on their Chromebooks. You told me once that scared me about on Chromebooks in most of the school districts, not so much in ours, by the way, for historical reasons, but most of the districts have some sort of a software to try to filter out content, YouTube or video games, things of that sort. Like in our district, for example, many kids were playing a game called Epstein Island. But you have told me that from your experience, even though there's all these magical tools that sound great and no internet, the kids will 99 point something percent will find a way around it. And still, with the best efforts of the district, will still find a way to go to YouTube and to Google Message and message each other or Instagram or whatever it is. Can you tell?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And guess who's the best at that? ADHD kids and teens. They're the best at working around any firewall and figuring it out. So there goes that whole concept of let's give them more tech to prepare them for a tech-filled future. They're already pretty damn good at it. And they know how to work around those firewalls real fast. And this is exactly what's happening. I see it in every single classroom. I have observed over 200, 300 classrooms over the past couple of years, and every single time they're off task. I'm sure if you listen to the webinar with Emily, she can give you the exact statistic of how often a kid is off task in an hour. And it's the majority of that hour. They're going to be off task. And even the schools now that are banning cell phones, but they still give kids laptops, kids find a way to do screen mirroring so their laptop becomes their phone. So they're using their laptop as if it's a phone. So there's no way you're going to keep kids from accessing the most addicting thing in their life. They're going to work around it. I have never once in all my years, public schools, private schools, charter schools, religious schools, ever seen a school implement some sort of firewall or software that the kids did not shut down rather quickly.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing that in our school district. I'm wondering, when you work with families, how do you advise them in these kind of situations? What do you suggest that they do?
Well, the majority of them is I connect them with individuals like Emily and Andy, some of my, greatest colleagues and some of my best friends now, people I love to call my friends and my role models, great people, incredible human beings, and Alex Becker, of course, and the great people out there, and connect them with them to let them know that you have the right to opt out of this technology. The technology is a problem. One thing we do is we start with the homework at home. So the EdTech, and you guys did a great job writing this in a recent letter I saw, of ever since the introduction of laptops and one-to-one technology in schools, it has really negatively impacted the family structure. And parents now sit at home with so much fear and so much anxiety in that hour before their kid comes home from school, because they know that they are in for a 5-hour fight over 15 minutes of homework. Because of this laptop, they know has to be monitored. I have to sit with you. I have to watch you to make sure you're not sneaking YouTube, you're not playing games, you're on task, you're getting your stuff done. Because parents have been convinced that your child's homework output and their grades and their school success is a reflection of your parenting, which it is not in any way, shape, or form. So overall, all of this technology comes home and it makes homework an absolute mess, where it's really fracturing the parent-child relationship over the parent thinking that they have to be the homework secretary. So that's one of the first things that we do, is help the parents create some structure around homework, where homework's either getting done at school and the laptop stays at school, it's getting done at a local library, it's being done with peers through ADHD body doubling, whatever it needs to be. But it really can't be done with parents, because the ADHD brain has the most symptoms, the most behaviors around unconditional relationships, which is mom and dad. Who sees the worst of ADHD behaviors? Mom. Because you open a dictionary, you look up unconditional love, it's a picture of a mom, let's be honest. So moms get the worst of ADHD behaviors, and it does tend to be the mom who carries that mental load and feels the need to sit with the child and do their homework with them. And that really decreases both of their quality of life, and that's not fair. So we have to advocate for these parents whose quality of life is decreasing because of this ed tech. So that's one of the first things we start with is the negative impact in the home. And then we look at what's happening in class. How can the laptop be opted out of completely, or how can it be minimized so it's used as little as possible? Emily talks about how she did it for her daughter over on the West Coast, and she's an individual that does not have a laptop at all, and we've been able to do it for hundreds of families to opt out of it or use it minimally. And pretty much every single time you see progress and their grades go up. And not only do their grades go up, but their thoughts and feelings and emotions towards school get better. That's the fascinating conundrum about this is schools brought in kids' favorite thing, which is gamification, the internet, computers, all these different things. Kids, most of these kids are screen addicted in many ways, and schools brought in screens. And ever since that happened, we now see rampant school refusal, chronic absenteeism, more off-task behavior, more behaviors, grades plummeting. So ever since schools brought in kids' favorite thing, it made them hate school more. What a coincidence.
Yeah, that's a pretty wild concept, but that's what we're hearing from a lot of the children. I mean, my own. I'm wondering if you were going to design a perfect classroom for the families that you're working with. You already talked about taking away the screens. What do you think the first steps would be from like a school perspective, working from what you're seeing typically in schools right now?
Well, I love that question. That is an awesome question. So I can tell you have a lot of experience with ADHD. That is a fantastic question. So number one, I would really focus on what Finland does, which is a lot of project-based learning, group work, experience-based learning. So the number one rule in all of ADHD parent training. So I referred to this earlier that ADHD and executive dysfunction kids are sent to inappropriate therapies like talk therapy, counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy. The real recommendation is parent coaching and parent training. That is the number one most evidence-based treatment. You can look it up at effectivechildtherapy.org. So the number one rule in all of ADHD parent training is use 90% less language, because language makes dysregulation worse. And the more you talk, the more you lecture, the more you explain, you're basically giving them an audience, and you're unintentionally reinforcing those behaviors because their brains get stimulated from negative attention. So the more you talk and the more you lecture, the worse things get. So we have to unplug their brain from the negative stimulus, which is the words, the language. So parents are talking too much at home, and teachers, the American teacher talks and lectures. This lecture listen model of American education does more standing up and lecturing than any other country in the world in terms of just standing there and explaining things and expecting it to stick in their minds. So you look at Finland, teachers there are doing less lecturing, I think at a 50 or 60% less level. So it's up to the kids to work together, work in groups, do some project-based learning, interview other people, go out in the community, do different things. And basically what Finland did was it took all of the research that America did on how kids learn best, what education should look like. We did the research, we just ignored it. Finland took it and used it, and now they have the best education in the entire world. And this has nothing to do with socialism. There's nothing to do with them being smaller or whatever it is. There's no reason for us to do less lecture listen and more project-based, relationship-based, experience-based learning, because that's how kids learn, and that's how executive functions are developed.
I wanted to ask you a question, but now you kind of shocked me with this because we raise kids in a bilingual home. I speak only Hebrew, family, everybody speaks only in English. But I always thought that the more words, the better. Like I read them and talk to them and read them, mostly read them, like big books. Harry Potter.
That's reading books. That's not lecturing. You're reading books. Yes. If any parent heard me say that and thought reading kids' books is bad, then I apologize. No, do what he's doing and read them as many books as you can. That is one of the healthiest things you can do as a parent is read them books, regardless of age. What I'm talking about is lecturing to them about what they did wrong, lecturing them about what they did. So like in the morning, go get dressed, go put your shoes on, go brush your teeth, go downstairs, go do this, like constantly just verbal prompting instead of letting the kids stop, notice, and do, and figure it out themselves and develop independence.
Thank you. Now I understand what you meant. So let me ask you a real live question, because we were talking, and this is just generally about classes and about school. I told you at the beginning of the conversation, we have a big grassroots in our school district. And we have a very active WhatsApp group. In fact, I'm sure that if I were to check it now, probably
Very
just
active.
at the beginning of the talk, 100, a lot of messages. But there is some disagreement or two different philosophies or thoughts in this group. One of them, which I'm part of, is that right now, what we would like to focus on is the possibility of opting out. For example, in our school district, we have a policy that says if a parent would like to opt out their children from one-to-one personal device, Chromebooks, etc., they can do so, and a principal of the school will create an alternative equivalent educational program. So many of us are trying to do this and convince the school district to allow us. Just in my elementary school, of my two kids, about a third of the entire parents of the school or a third of the families are interested in opting out. That's a lot. So far, it's a resounding no. We can't do it. But many of us are thinking, this is what we need to do now. Focus on start with the one-to-one devices. Others are like, it's not that. We have to be holistic. Like, for example, talk about screens, reduce, we hear awful stories about the smart boards that sometimes teachers are sitting back, the smart board is playing a YouTube, and the YouTube is reading a book, or other types of educational technology, meaning that, in your opinion, would it be a good start to focus on the opting out, or what is the strategy that you suggest to parents who are interested in this type of activism to reduce the screens in their schools?
So we need something. We're at a boiling point. We're at a crisis here. Grades are plummeting. And as Dr. Horvath describes better than anyone, this generation of youth is doing far worse than the generations before for the first time in human history, because we stole play, boredom, and struggle, and introduced screens and put more money into big tech's pocket. And just like my friend Emily always says, big tech with those smartphones and everything, EdTech is just big tech in a sweater vest, like she always says. It's the exact same thing. So we're putting more and more money into their pockets and iReady and everything and those kinds of things. So opting out, sure. If that's going to work, that's great. But we're seeing all across the country, we're seeing what other school districts are doing. They're banning it for the youngest kids, which is common sense. The fact that we were giving kindergartners iPads. I've spoken to kindergarten teachers where they were forced to have their kindergartners do work on an iPad. And if they didn't finish it, they had to do it during lunch. They had to sit there and eat, and they weren't allowed to talk to their peers during lunch and finish their iPad-based assignment. It's child abuse. It's horrible. That the fact that we thought giving these kids screens, kindergartners, first graders, giving them screens, it blows my mind that anyone ever thought that was a good idea. So we're seeing a lot of school districts around the country start by getting rid of it for the younger years, which is just pure common sense, needs to happen all across the country. For the older ages, yes, you have the right to opt out, and opting out is a great place to start. But we're at a boiling point right now. If you haven't read Jared's book, The Digital Delusion, you need to do it. You need to look at the overall statistics of everything that's going on. And we can't keep turning a blind eye towards it. The same thing with The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, one of the most influential books of the past 10, 15 years. How many parents read The Anxious Generation, got to the final page, read the last page, was emotionally moved by it, but just put it back on the shelf and did nothing about it, and kept the smartphone in their child's life, kept the Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, social media in the child's life, because the alternative of having to take it away from the child is far too scary. Because my child's going to withdraw and go completely nuts for 2 to 3 weeks while their brain detoxes from that screen. So that's the exact same thought we're having now at school, is we're so scared of what's going to happen if we remove those screens. So yes, start with opting out, but we can't end the battle there. Big tech is the second big tech realized we are going to make the majority of our money off of kids. We're going to make the majority of our money off of neurodivergent kids. We cannot continue to allow big tech to steal our kids' childhood. We're now seeing the statistics of Gen Z going into the workforce and bringing their parents with them to job interviews and having their parents speak to hiring managers. And they're getting fired at astounding rates. And they're being passed over at interviews for older, more expensive people that didn't have Chromebooks and didn't have smartphones growing up. So we need to save this generation. This is a true executive functioning crisis. And the only way to do that is to give them their childhoods back. All kids have is the world we give them. They don't have the cognition to stand up and say, you know what? I'm not ready for these screens. I'm not ready. You gave me a phone too soon, mom and dad. Can you please take this Xbox and sell it to GameStop? They're not going to do that. They're going to tell you through their behaviors. All behavior is communication. But we only want to believe that when it's warm and fuzzy and makes us feel good. Like, oh, that's a connection-seeking behavior. He needs more hugs and kisses and me to get on his level, and he needs more connection from me. But how about the behaviors we're seeing every single day at school, where task refusal, talking back to teachers, not getting work done, anger, aggression? That behavior is communication that my brain can't handle having a laptop in front of me like I'm a college student sitting in a lecture hall. And then at home, we're seeing behaviors at home, and we're seeing playgrounds empty, streets empty, clubs, sports, activities, low enrollment because they're at home on screens. And that the behavior parents are seeing every single day, the dysregulation, is communication. Mom, dad, you gave me too many screens too soon. When these are available to me, I can't do anything else.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm wondering, I heard you say outdoor play, boredom, and struggle, that those are the best things for children. And so with the parents who are struggling with dialing it back and introducing more of those outdoor play, boredom, and struggle, can you share with us what a typical experience of dialing that back might look like for families that you've worked with? Like, is there a typical amount of time that it takes? I know everyone's different, but it'll be really hard for the first few weeks, or can you talk about that?
It typically takes around 2 to 3 weeks. So in all my years of doing this, and you said it great, every single kid is different. Nothing is 100% accuracy. But in all my years of doing this, I have never worked with a single family where we help them significantly decrease tech or fully eliminate tech and did not see astounding progress. And then parents were stuck with the whole thought of, why didn't I just do this sooner? And yes, every single time we mention it to them in the parent coaching sessions, their face turns ghost white in fear. Like, you're telling me I have to cancel their phone plan? You're telling me I have to take the Xbox, PlayStation, Switch? I have to opt out of the Chromebook? Yeah, it's terrifying. But it takes around 2 to 3 weeks for their brain to detox from the screen addiction and to be able to regulate through that boredom. And during that 2 to 3 weeks, they're going to use every single tool in their toolkit. You're going to see anger. You're the worst mom ever. None of my friends' parents do this. You're ruining my life. I have no more friends. They're going to go from anger to negative self-talk to sympathy seeking. They're going to do everything they can to get you to cave. So it's very, very important that you have some kind of support, and better yet, other families in your neighborhood who are doing it at the exact same time as you. Try not to do it alone. A big aspect, like we talked about earlier, many parents are screen addicted. So they feel hypocritical taking the screens away from their kids. So kind of on that same mindset, we should also be letting our kids drive and vote and join the army and drink alcohol and those kind of things. We have to start looking at phones and social media that way, where it's a rite of passage into young adulthood. But parents are incredibly addicted, and we don't know our neighbors. Jonathan Haidt talks about this. We don't know our neighbors like we used to. When we were all kids, we would be able to like, mom, dad, see you later, I'm going. And we would go out into the neighborhood for hours with no phone, no Life 360, no water bottle. And we would just figure it out. No GPS. And we would be home in time for dinner because our parents knew our neighbors and understood and were confident that they would watch over us when we were playing in the neighborhood. Now, we don't know our neighbors like we used to. And there's a lot of stranger danger in our 24-hour news cycle. But in reality, right now, the outside world has never been safer for a child. To go walk miles down the road, go to Wawa, get something yourself and come back. It's never been safer for a kid to do that. What is incredibly unsafe for a child? The internet. because all the dangerous people that were out there harming children are now online. They're on Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft. I know on my Facebook feed, at least once a week, I see something about someone getting arrested on Roblox or something happening on Roblox. And I'm sure many of the parents here today, their kids probably have played Roblox today, and letting them play it behind closed doors. You don't know who they're interacting with. You don't know what's happening. Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, Discord, Snapchat. The internet is the most unregulated thing probably in human history. It's unregulated, and all of us, we see how people act on social media. We see how people comment on things on Facebook and Instagram. People are really mean, and they're racist, and they're rude, and they just say incredibly crazy things online because they're keyboard warriors and it's online. And we see how adults act. How are kids going to act? We can't trust them to act that way online. So yes, 2 to 3 weeks to detox, but try to do it with other parents. One of the best things parents can do is use social media in ways it was intended. Go onto your parent Facebook group, go onto your local neighborhood group, and just write an anonymous message if you want to. A lot of these groups allow that, where you can say, hey, I'm sick and tired of the Chromebooks. I'm sick and tired of the screens. I'm sick and tired of seeing my kid be addicted and dysregulated. I'm ready to eliminate these screens. Who's with me? Who wants to do it? And I guarantee you're going to get a pretty positive result. So if you're able to do it with 1, 2, 3, 4 other families, there's a great app idea of have a map of your neighborhood of parents that want to remove screens at the same time. Find other screen-free families. There you go. Just thought of that right now, guys. So it's just that right there. So try to find other families to do it with you so that you can get the kids together and they can play and they can be kids while they detox.
This is great. So I'm actually going to ask Leath a question, because Leath is a parent in my district in a different school. She has 2 kids, elementary, going into also middle school. But Leath, you really have a lot of experience in all of this. Not only what you founded, the caring and caring, but you bring a lot of family system perspective, and you really are an expert in early childhood. And now, in the last year, you've been doing pretty much nonstop in the psychiatric hospital in social work internship. All of basically working nonstop with kids 6 to 14, mostly with ADHD. So I wanted to ask you being a parent of 2 children and also being exposed to all this work that you have been doing professionally, what is your thought? What are your thoughts and some of the insights? I know that you have spoken in some of the meetings at LMSD. What are your insights about the screens in schools, Chromebooks, etc.?
Right. So that's a great question. Like I mentioned, the jump from 4th grade to 5th grade has been quite significant for me, and I've spoken at the last LMSD policy meeting and at the digital meeting that we had. One of my concerns is really, really basic. My 5th grader estimates that he's on his Chromebook 70% of his day, which is really, really extreme. And we've already opted out of him not bringing it home. He's the only one in his pod, which is 100 children who he knows does not, which is kind of wild to me. I've also mentioned that I feel like a lot of parents don't know that that's an option, or that if they do it, that what the accommodations will look like, because they do accommodate for that in my experience on the 5th grade level. But my 5th grader is not getting experience handwriting. So the skills that are still developing are not getting a chance to develop. And that's what I'm hearing a lot about, is that we as adults are losing skills that we once had, but the children today are not getting a chance to develop the skills. That really concerns me. And then another concern that I have is for my 1st grader, we actually don't have iPads at home. So where did she learn to use an iPad? It's in her 1st grade classroom. And while it's like 15 minutes twice a day, what is not a lot of screen time to some people happens to be a lot. And for my family, it is. And it's been challenging for me. That's why I appreciate the opt-out. It doesn't need to be, we don't need that. We don't need that, especially in 1st grade. And I don't think we need it in 5th grade either. And we could go on, the numbers could get higher, but I think that the one-on-one relationships is where the brain is stimulated the most, where the deepest learning happens. There aren't multiple tabs open at one time. And metaphorically speaking, and then also on our computers, it's just too much for young minds to manage. So why are we doing it? Can we dial it back? Those are the big questions that we're asking. And I think that we're seeing with LAUSD just passing screen limits, which we don't have screen limits. We actually don't know how much screen time our children are on. I say my son estimates 70%, but I don't have those numbers from the district. So yeah, I'd love to hear, Michael, what you have to say about this too.
Yeah, and I love this question was asked and you were able to answer it as a parent. When we really look at what's happening here, big picture, the only thing that's holding us back, all of us, parents, teachers, educators, everything, is fear. If any single parent in the world right now, if they knew that they could remove the phone from the child's life without the fear of their withdrawal behaviors, without the fear that they'll be socially left out, that phone would be gone instantly. It's the fear that keeps it in the child's life. And it's the same thing with schools. We spent millions of dollars on these computers. If we take the phones away, if we take the Chromebooks away, how are they going to do on the tech-based standardized tests? Because those are so important for funding and pensions and everything else. So it's all based on fear. And what are the teachers going to do? The teachers are now so reliant on these things and everything else. So all of these things are keeping us from repeating the same mistake. We all know that famous saying of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's exactly what we're doing. This youth mental health crisis that has been going on for years before Jonathan Haidt wrote The Anxious Generation is getting worse. It is absolutely getting worse because kids are getting phones younger. They're on it more. Experiences are decreasing. Relationships are decreasing. Earlier, I mentioned executive functions are the greatest predictor of success for human beings, the most crucial set of skills you can develop from birth before you go off to college. And the only way to build executive functions is through varied experiences, doing as many different things as possible, getting your hands in as many different varied experiences as possible, and face-to-face interpersonal relationships, meeting as many different people from different backgrounds and races and religions and different values, meeting as many different people as possible. That's what builds the brain, those things. And what does Jonathan Haidt say? Screens are experience killers. And big tech, what's the best way to sell a product? Fear-based marketing. If you don't buy your child this phone, they're not going to have friends. They're going to be left out. They're not going to be ready for a tech-filled future. And we fell for that hook, line, and sinker. You show me a single kid out there that got a smartphone and it improved their social life. Go ahead and show me. Big tech tells us that phones and Chromebooks are going to make kids safe, smart, and social. And now we have a decade of data to tell us it makes them depressed, dormant, dependent on adults, antisocial, and obviously not as cognitively capable.
So, Michael, we're going to move for everybody. We're going to extend our session. Michael's been gracious enough to extend it to 9:45, so 15 minutes extra because we have a bunch of
Let's go to 11.
questions. What's that?
Let's go to 11, 12, midnight. I got nowhere to be.
We could talk forever.
Let's do it.
But I actually have a question follow-up to what, before we take the questions, to what Leath was saying. She mentions that and I've heard it from a lot of parents, there's something about that leap between elementary school to middle school, not only in our district, but everywhere. And what I'm hearing is that maybe in middle school, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. In middle school, it's less of the home class and kids are moving around, and in each one they have different expectations, different apps, different, programs. And even when they go back home, their homework are all over the place, and it's even difficult for them to remember which homework is on which app, etc. Can you comment a little bit about, because I'm hearing a lot of, yes, elementary, it's a problem, maybe high school a little bit better, but the middle school, I'm hearing a lot of scary things from parents and educators.
Of course. And what is that jump? It's executive functioning. So what we all need to think about, executive functions are independent skills. Your child's ability to initiate, persist, and complete non-preferred tasks, to plan, prioritize, and be independent without adult help, without a massive 504 plan, a massive IEP, which are very, very important. I know everything I say gets taken at face value. IEPs and 504s are very, very important, but we don't want our ADHD executive dysfunction kids to get prompt dependent on accommodations, their teachers to repeat things, and all these different things. So let's look at elementary school. Number one, academically, it's the same teacher all the time teaching every single subject. Very, very structured. Every single day is the same. They go to middle school, it's now a different teacher for every subject, different teaching style. Some post the grades, some don't post the grades, some have you write, some have you do this. Everything is different. And the only one who can keep track of it is the child. But in today's age, it falls on the parents' shoulders, where parents can no longer be the parent. They're now the school secretary, the homework secretary, which leads to instant burnout. So middle school academically gets a lot more rigorous, and it's a lot more than just memorizing information and regurgitating it onto a test. It's now you have to keep track of all your belongings, keep track of where you're going, keep track of a wackier, zanier schedule, and all the different things that are happening. That's academically. Let's also think about socially. Socially, it's elementary school, they're babies. It's a lot of that, we're all friends, we're all families, all those kinds of things. Now, all of a sudden, middle school, it's not that way. And boys and girls start to make their little friend groups. It starts to be little cliques and different groups. And it's our neurodivergent, screen addicted kids that get left out. The first executive skill to develop is self-awareness, the ability to understand that you have an impact on others. It develops when you're a little baby, when you start to realize, hey, wait a second, when I cry, what happens? Someone comes and helps me out. When I smile in mom's face, she smiles back. I have a control over my world. And over time, that's the first executive skill to develop, but over time becomes one of the most delayed. So in middle school, that lack of self-awareness starts to really negatively impact them socially. And I describe this as the true heartbreak of ADHD youth. These incredibly socially motivated kids that want friends, that want attention, that want experiences, end up having a lack of perspective-taking skills, higher level self-awareness, where it really impacts them in the middle school years. So now all of a sudden they're failing socially, and we expect them to feel good about themselves and ignore games, ignore hacking the laptop, and to wake up in the morning and to actually try at school. No, they're gonna fall deeper into Roblox, Fortnite, Minecraft, and all these different things when it starts to become not very age appropriate anymore. Those are elementary school style things. Now we have middle schoolers developing their entire persona around these games because they've struggled so much socially in the middle school years. They're struggling academically, and everything tends to spiral downward in middle school because the executive functions have not caught up because we missed it in the elementary school years because of all the EdTech.
Got it. Well, thank you for explaining that. We're going to move to some of the questions. So Sarah is mentioning she's a parent of a soon-to-be third grader with ADHD, and she wants to know, how do we advocate for our students that should not have free access to devices in the classroom? What do we say, and how do we hold the schools and the teachers, but I would say more the school and the district, accountable for what is happening in the classes?
Well, I think parents need to follow suit with what the incredible parents of Lower Merion have done, what the incredible parents of Los Angeles have done, parents in Utah and all these different places where we're seeing the tide turning. We need to be very active in these meetings. We need to go to these school board meetings. We need to go to the IEP meetings, the 504 meetings, and we have to be very, very targeted. Have conversations with Jared, Emily, Andy, who I'm amazed at how readily they make themselves available with how much of experts they are in these topics. Number one thing is to know you're not alone. This is an ongoing crisis, and it's an absolute mess. I've said many, many times, this is the worst thing to ever happen to education in the history of education, and that's saying something because the education system hasn't been broken for a long time. You have to be very, very vocal about it, and you can't be afraid to let the school know you're opting out. If this Chromebook comes home, I will be physically returning it to the main office. I will not be bringing my child. My child will not be returning to school tomorrow with this in their backpack. So you need to be very, very clear that you are opting out of EdTech, and make sure that you speak to other professionals, other parents, so it can be sort of a group-based approach.
Leath, you want to take the next one, or you want me to take? I'll take the next one.
Yeah,
What's that?
yeah, go ahead.
So Jordan is asking, I think it's an interesting question, because I don't know the answer also. Can you please speak to why the learning management systems, which is, for example, Schoology, Canvas, Google Classrooms, these types of management systems, are hurting the kids' ability to build their own or their executive function skills? For example, she's saying the auto-populated calendar for assignments, so they don't write things in a planner. So she wants to learn about this connection between these learning management systems and the executive function skills.
So this is actually something I learned from the great Dr. Horvath. Is kids, in all of his study as a neuroscientist in education and child development, is kids need to learn analog hand first. We made the huge mistake of giving kids tech first, saying this is the future, they need computer skills, and getting it in those early grades of kindergarten and first grade. Kids need to learn by using a planner first. They need to see this work in their own handwriting, physically, a paper thing there, right there, before it's there and a computer is doing it for you. We see it as adults as well, with the 20 different alarms we have in the clock app and all the different notifications that pop up that we ignore so we can continue scrolling. It's the exact same thing. You cannot use a screen or a computer or the internet to replace executive functions. These things are never going to work. You have to experience success and independence with your hand, face to face, in a tangible physical thing first before we transition it to some kind of system. So all you adults out there that have jobs on computers, that use Evernote or Google Keep, whatever it may be, Gmail, whatever, you probably grew up with an agenda at school. You probably went to college and you didn't have a laptop in front of you, you had notebooks and you were writing hand in hand. You are successful at those computer things now because you had years of developing this experience analog before internet.
Thank you. We have two questions that feel related. What age do you feel is appropriate to introduce computer skills? And then adjacent to that, learning about AI.
Oh my. Okay. So computer skills is a very vague term. I have always been a proponent for schools having computer labs. I think it's a fantastic thing. I had it in elementary school back when I was going to school in the 50s and 60s and all those kind of things. Just kidding. I'm not that old. But overall, just in general, I remember we had a computer lab where we would leave class and get experience on Word, Excel, PowerPoint, research, Encyclopedia Britannica, whatever it was back then, all those different things. That was an amazing experience. But there was no dysregulation when it was time to leave that room and go back to sitting in a lecture because we weren't so focused on it and all of our education did not revolve around it. So there's no reason for our schools not to have computer labs where kids get access to it for an hour a day to practice on it and work. And you can start to do that in probably second, third grade, as long as you limit it and it's just one separate room they use for a portion. So it all really depends on exactly what it is. But it's really fascinating. The kids that don't have social media, the kids that don't have smartphones tend to have the most friends and the most enriched social life. And the kids that go to tech-free schools tend to be the best at tech when they get older. Go and read Bill Gates' memoir, and his autobiography. He went to a completely nature-based tech-free school, and he became one of the biggest tech giants of all time. So it's this concept that they need exposure to it to gain the skills for a tech-filled future. It's nonsense. And you mentioned AI. Remember about 10 years ago when everything was about get your coding certificate, go to coding camp, quit your job and become a coder. No one's saying that anymore because AI now does it for you. So, all this talk about screens and tech being the skill of the future, in the future, AI is going to be doing all that for us. So guess what the skill of the future is? People skills, executive functions, communication skills, relationship-based skills. When your kids go into a job interview, they're going to be able to tell, did they have in-person relationships? Did they wake up, go to school, come home, stay home? And the vast majority of their childhood and adolescence was the walls of the home, the walls of the school, and very little varied experiences. They're going to want to hire someone that's fun to be around and someone you want in the office, someone you want in your team, not someone who's just amazing at computers. So, AI is an incredibly scary thing. I just read recently they're delaying the updates to some of the great AI systems because it's almost too scary what it's capable of doing. So what it's going to do to overall employment is scary. What it's going to do to the economy is scary. But once again, our kids are dependent on us. They experience the world we give them. The last thing we should be doing is giving them AI. Already with EdTech and Chromebooks, how much of your kids' homework assignments isn't testing their knowledge of the content? It's testing how good they are at Google. How good are you at copying and pasting? How good are you at changing what Google says to put it on the paper? So are they really testing the information, or are they testing how good they are copying and pasting? And we see that happening with ChatGPT, and we see, Grow now has an entire college success program. And what we're seeing at colleges across the country is they're getting rid of paper tests. They're just having it be town hall style discussions in the classroom where you have to verbally talk about the content. You have to be able to add to the discussion. And it's like a participation grade. That's your grade now, because they can't expect the kid to go home and not use AI.
Well, I think that, I'll just make a comment that I agree with a lot of the concerns that you have about AI. Specifically, what I do, I'm in healthcare and I do a lot of AI. I work with different AI companies. And I also see, again, I see the benefits, huge benefits in terms of we already are saving thousands of lives every day because of using AI technology on imaging, on, the electronic medical records, a lot of different things. But maybe because I'm so sensitive to AI and it's kind of like I deal with it every day, I recognize exactly what you said, including the harms. Specifically, you're right. Like people who say, well, the kids need to know the skills of coding. I mean, you don't go to the future. Even you're talking now. I mean, if you speak with ChatGPT or Gemini, all these things, you really, for the vast majority of tasks, 99% of the things, you don't need to know anything. It's the interface is becoming so trivial and simple that you just speak with it and it speaks back with you. So I do have a follow-up question about, because we talked a little bit about writing, how important it is to write. Like, Shapiro, for example, in Pennsylvania is now talking about the importance of cursive writing and handwriting versus in terms of executive, development of executive functions versus learning on how to type and write an essay on typing on the Chromebook or the computer. And also in the same line, is there a significant difference when because my daughter is told in second grade to read books on the Chromebook on an app called Raz, and she can't stand it. She always prefers and asks for a physical book. Is there a difference in terms of the development of these cognitive or executive skills in terms of writing versus typing and reading on the computer versus a book?
There is a massive difference. I would compare it to like a brain scan of somebody who's walking/jogging or someone who's sitting dormant. And you would see the brain sort of just sitting there dormant, not really doing anything, versus someone actually moving, and you would see all the different colors and those sorts of things. And like, I'm sure we've all seen that on social media. Well, this is the brain, when it's walking. This is the brain when it's dormant. That's what I would compare it to. And why is writing so important? Because writing is executive functioning. So what are the two academic tasks that kids with ADHD and executive dysfunction tend to struggle with the most? Number one, reading comprehension. Because what do we do when we read? We have to make a mental movie of what we're reading while we read it. That's nonverbal working memory, the foundational deficit of ADHD, being able to make mental movies. And then writing is even more difficult because you have to have everything visualized and organized up here, and then very slowly transfer it down the arm to the paper and pen or to the keyboard. So there's more of a delay involved. And when it comes to ADHD, they struggle with delays. Their brains need instant gratification. So writing is really, really hard. One of the best accommodations we push for on 504s is for kids to be able to record themselves orally describing what they want to write about. And then while they're writing, they can listen to it with noise canceling headphones, listen to their own voice describing what they want to write. And it's fascinating how much that helps ADHD kids be able to write, because you tend to see a lot of ADHD kids sit there with an empty Microsoft Word thing with nothing written on it or an empty page. For them to hear their own voice describing it is basically creating that self-directed talk, that brain coach. So writing is a true rite of passage for a child. We have to be able to write. Let's bring back journaling into the classroom. Let's let kids write about whatever they want. They don't need to be writing about the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and all these different things. Let's let them write about their lives and their own feelings and their experiences and their own goals. Let's get them tracking their own progress. Let's bring personal development and growth back into schools. I think that would be incredibly beneficial, and it would really help these kids who are really struggling emotionally.
Just to say that I dropped in the chat a YouTube from 60 Minutes Australia that just came out last month, and many people have discussed it. It basically talks about, brain fog, dissociation, and actually significant cognitive changes seen on MRI and functional MRI as a result of screens. And the concern, of course, is children, because you're actually harming the development of these brain centers. Leath, do you want to take the next question?
Sure, we have a question from Lisa. She says, my child goes to a special school for children with language-based learning disorders. There is a high co-occurrence with ADHD. They have historically only taught using paper and pencil. They just introduced one-on-one Chromebooks in 6th grade. What points or questions would you recommend I ask the administration to push back on this?
To continue using the paper and pen, especially if they have language-based learning difficulties. There's no reason to have them start there and then start to introduce it. Allow them to keep doing what they're doing, keep building that skill. Introducing the Chromebook is basically going to end up negating that pen to paper skill that they worked on for all those years. So I would be very vocal about keeping pen to paper, especially with those diagnostic labels, those medical codes you probably already have of, receptive language disorder, expressive language disorder, whatever it may be, pragmatic language disorder, all of those things that tend to go hand in hand with ADHD. Like I mentioned earlier, I was a speech and language pathologist. Now I do ADHD because there's such a co-occurrence there. A lot of kids that have ADHD that pops up in elementary, middle school receive speech and language therapy through early intervention, birth to 5. So them being in that specialized school, it's very, very important that you advocate for them and do whatever you can, because a lot of these specialized schools, it tends to be not just Chromebooks, but let's make it MacBooks now because they get out-of-pocket tuition, which just makes it even worse. So I think one of the best things you can advocate for is pass them a copy of the Digital Delusion, pass them a copy of the Executive Functioning Playbook, share the mountains of evidence of what screens have done to the developing brain. Brain rot and digital dementia are not catchy terms. Those aren't just like catchy, cool terms. Those are real things. The screen-based child and teen brain mimics someone that actually has dementia. Brain rot's a real thing. So I would definitely advocate to eliminate those screens and go back to paper and pen as fast as you can.
Another question from Meredith, who so happens to be a fellow cardiologist. She's asking, how do you help parents with ADHD kids in a district that does not have an option of opting out from one-to-one personalized devices? What would you suggest if we don't have that policy whatsoever, or we don't have that option? Do you utilize IEP to limit or remove these devices? Are district, from your experience, receptive if you use these IEP?
I will keep it very brief and short and sweet. I would have a discussion with the great Andy Liddell as fast as you possibly can. Andy Liddell is one of the great heroes and voices and individuals championing this cause. He is absolutely incredible. You listen to him speak for a minute, you'll be blown away. I strongly recommend reaching out. Go to edtechlaw.com, Google Andy Liddell, and have a conversation with him about what's happening and learn your rights and learn what you can do. And the last thing any parent wants to do, ADHD or not, is wave the white flag and just accept things for what they are. Go out there, learn your rights, learn your resources, and a great place to start. Of course, Jared Horvath, Emily Churkin, but in this case, I would definitely have a conversation with Andy Liddell, who is the best of the best.
Thank you. We have another question. How do you help teenagers get out and get more life experiences and personal experiences to help them with executive function who also have bad RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria? Seems the only friends they have are online.
Yes. So that is a fantastic question. So the number one thing we have to remember, RSD is not a separate diagnosis. It's really just explaining that the core symptom of their ADHD is dysregulation. So for decades, we treated anxiety wrong by over accommodating it and allowing kids with anxiety to avoid the things that makes them anxious. And we're now learning we did that wrong. And we need to actually expose them more to the things that make them anxious through that exposure therapy and getting them out there. And that's what decreases the anxiety. So the last thing we want to do is say, my child has ADHD, my child has rejection sensitive dysphoria, he struggles socially. So let me get him some screens so he can make screen-based friends. This takes me back to my very first point I made tonight, is the biggest victims of this mess are ADHD kids. These are kids that struggle at school and they struggle socially. Oh, here's this tool that will help him make friends. So I better get it for him so it can help him because he's really struggling socially and he's down on himself. So the last thing you want to do is fall for big tech's propaganda and accept those online friends as real friends. We just talked about the brain typing versus the brain writing. Well, the brain having a social interaction on a screen versus a social interaction face-to-face in person will show you that screen-based relationships are not real relationships. So do not allow your child to have online friendships, online relationships, and just say, this is what kids do now. This is how kids make friends now. No, we have to take this very, very seriously. Human beings are social animals. Food, water, shelter, relationships. You need relationships for a high quality of life. You need relationships to build executive functions, become independent, and be positive and successful. We cannot allow their relationships to be online. So one of the biggest things we have to remember, like I mentioned earlier, parents see the worst of ADHD behaviors. A lot of the parents that are here today, many of you have probably called your kid's teacher and described your kid at home. And the teacher's like, wait a second, are we talking about the same kid here? He's an angel here at school. I can't believe he acts that way at home, because the ADHD brain responds better to structure and condition at school as opposed to unstructure and unconditional at home. So parents tend to see the worst of ADHD behaviors. So what you have to do as parents, and this is why parent coaching is so important, is you cannot confuse complaining for cannot. ADHD kids are going to complain 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more than their neurotypical peers. But don't take that complaining as they cannot. And another thing that social media has taught parents is if your kid has ADHD, lower the bar 3 to 5 years to their brain development age. No, you keep that bar high at their actual age. There's nothing more important for an ADHD kid or teen than a parent who believes in them, keeps the bar high, and keeps standards high. We're not going to lower them. We are going to get it in their IEP, get it in their 504, that they have to do some kind of club sport activity. Make these things an expectation and not a choice. We have to get them out there. Because I can tell you right now, social relationships are far more important than their grades. Give me a C- kid all day long with a big friend group, or 1 to 2 friends, which is totally fine, than the A+ kid who gets his homework done and then is on screens for the rest of the night. That second kid with the lower grades and lots of social experiences is going to be a lot more employable.
Very interesting. And I also, for those interested, I put in the chat the link to the book, Executive Function Playbook that Michael wrote. Highly recommended if you're interested. Oh, this is the book, exactly.
There you go. You
Now,
got it.
I'm going to finish with one last question because we're really out of time. And it's actually a question to Leath. So Sarah is asking Leath, because I think what Leath did is very brave. That basically, the family decided the middle schooler not to bring the Chromebook back home, the only one from 100 kids. I mean, I did the same thing with my kindergarten child. He's not getting an iPad this year at all, but that's easy. It's not the same thing at all. So the question that Sarah's asking, Leath, how do you explain this to your fifth grader that they're the only child that is not getting the device, and how was the reaction?
That's a great question. It's not an easy one. It's much like Mike has said. It's going against the grain. So actually, in the beginning of the school year, there were other students who had opted out of taking their Chromebooks home, and then the parents or families changed their course, and now my son seems to be the only one. But we talk about the reasons why. He's 10, but we talk about these reasons. It's not that what we're talking about in this space is just information for the adults. I think it's helpful for the children to have it at their level. And so for my 10-year-old, that looks like these are what our concerns are. One of my concerns with a 10-year-old bringing the Chromebook home is that actually promotes a culture in the schools and in their lives of constant connectivity. And that's not something that I want to have in the home. If there is homework that needs to be done at the home, it's sent on pen and paper, and that's what I want more of anyway. So, is it an easy conversation? No, but for him, for my son specifically, we talk about it and the reasons why, and he is on board. Another thing that I think is really helpful experience is that if you're in the Lower Merion School District, to come to some of these meetings. We have a big one coming up on the 11th, and I've brought both of my children there, and they were really moved and inspired and hearing the families talking. And so anyway, there's so much information. We could go on and on, but I think that talking with your children about what the concerns really are, not in the fear based way, but in like, hey, this is real stuff that we're talking about, and this is one small thing that we can do to protect against it.
That was a fantastic answer. I'm so happy you joined us tonight, Leath. That was great.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
with that, go ahead, Leath. You want
No,
to
I was going to say thank you so much. I've definitely learned so much from this conversation. I really appreciate Yair thinking of me for this. Thank you so much to both of you.
And thank you for moderating, and thank you, Michael. Any last comments? It was really fantastic, and I always learn so much from your life journey and your experience. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I just want to end this by saying how incredibly proud I am of the Lower Merion families. Being able to stand up to schools and to big tech and to EdTech. I think it's just so incredible what these parents are doing. Every single one of them that have signed the petition or have done the PA Unplugged and the Wait Until 8th, and all these parents just saying no and standing up and saving our kids. That this is the only way that we are going to end this youth mental health crisis is to stand up to big tech and say no. And I think Lower Merion School District is going to make a lot of really positive noise, a lot of really positive change, and really put this town on the map in really great ways. Since the great Kobe Bryant, of course, can do some really incredible things. And I think every single parent that attended tonight and is using their free time to better their kids. I'm originally from New York. I moved to Pennsylvania, and I have just been the best part of this work that I've done since 2015 is the parents I've met here. They are just so dedicated, so educated, so proactive. It's really, really incredible how much they've devoted their lives to their kids in the hardest time in history to be a parent. It's really incredible, and I'm very happy to be here and happy to be doing this kind of work, and just so proud of these families.
This is great. And thank you so much. This really means a lot that you joined us. And thank you all of the people from home who joined us. The recording is going to be available. We did not get to all of the questions and we really ran out of time. So we apologize, but thank you everybody and have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye everybody.
Bye.